So, welcome to Celtic Fae mythology. I would love to know how many of you have been to our previous Celtic Fae mythology classes. Feel free to just shout out that you have and tell me your name or tell me in chat. Also, I think I missed a question in chat. Hold on, let me scroll up.
I took the second class live, and I think I watched the first class on YouTube.
Awesome. Right on. Thank you. Cool. Awesome. Okay. We have Jen, Jordy, River. Okay. Honey has seen both. Kelsey has watched. Awesome. Cool. I think this is one of the first classes that we have a majority who have actually been to the previous classes. That's pretty cool. All of my classes, just so the rest of you know who have not seen the previous classes, all of my classes are structured and set up so you can jump right in whenever. So if you have not been to the previous classes, do not worry. It is okay. I do suggest if you feel a little bit lost, if you feel like I'm going over things too fast, remember that there are previous classes and that you can watch them on YouTube. There are 3 previous classes of this course. 2 of them are on YouTube. One of them is missing. It will be up. I promise. It will be there. But if you do feel a little bit lost, please go back and watch the other classes. Or also, you can go to our website as well and look at the notes. If reading is easier for you than watching a 2-hour-long video, I completely understand. You can also just read the notes, which are on our website. So, the Celtic Fae. Last class, we went over the one that is not on YouTube yet. We went over the elemental fae. They go by many names. Some people call them the elementals. Some people call them water sprites, earth sprites, air sprites, and fire sprites. Some people call them, they go by, the most common are going to be elementals and sprites. That's what we went over last class. But if you do happen to find, while you're reading about the fae, and they mention specific fae that are attached to certain elements, those are going to be elemental fae. And we went over those in the last class. We went over the symbology of earth, air, fire, and water. We went over the history of that symbology and how it made its way into Celtic mythology. And so briefly, just so that you know, and you're slightly caught up, the symbology that most of Europe uses for the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, stem from North Africa and the Middle East, as well as India. And if you have read about history, the Middle East and Europe have been trading for thousands of years. And spirituality, using whether it is reading books or verbal communication, spirituality traveled from the Middle East, from North Africa, from India, through Europe. And the symbology, the ideologies that are attached to earth, air, fire, and water made their way through Europe. And if you look at most European paganism, that is about 3,000 years old, around that age, you are going to find that a lot of it stems from the Middle East. And the same goes for elemental symbology, and that relates to the elemental fae and the fae that are attached to the symbology of those elements. And so a lot of times too, when you look at things like Celtic paganism in general, you look at paganism from the Strega witches in Italy. You look at paganism from a lot of the indigenous pagans throughout Europe. a lot of their symbology is going to stem from North Africa and the Middle East. And sometimes, yes, of course, you do have time periods where a lot of that information was stolen or culturally appropriated, but most of it was just talking and parties and trade and becoming friends and learning about each other's spirituality and loving it and sharing it and taking it on. And a lot of it was shared in a very open practice type of way. A lot of it was not stolen, especially back then. As once you get a little bit more into 1500 years ago, then you start to see where a lot of things were stolen from North Africa and West Africa, the Middle East and India. Um, but the Fae are not that. And so if you ever wonder when you're reading books, if you are somebody who really enjoys reading about mythology, and you notice that a lot of dragon mythology and Jinn mythology and Aziza mythology and Fae mythology, they all sound very similar. And they have a lot of roots from the same places. A lot of the elements represent the same thing. A lot of the rituals have very similar practices. A lot of that is because of shared open practice and shared spirituality throughout those places for thousands of years. You look at something like tarot, and you have a lot of Middle Eastern influence from numerology and symbology of the elements. And then you have the influence of Italy and France when you have the major arcana. And the same thing goes for Fae mythology. Let me go to the chat really quick. I see that there are some. Awesome. Okay, cool. So, yes, we are going to try to connect to the same spirits that we did last time, but in a much different way. We are going to be we are going to start introducing astral projection into this class because it is a very large part of learning about the Fae and learning about mythology. We are, of course, going to go over the actual written records of Celtic mythology and the actual records of people from thousands of years ago, as well as indigenous people from Ireland and from the UK in general. And we are going to look at the ancient practices from Celtic mythology and how they looked at the Fae, but also we are going to do our own astral projection where we communicate with the Fae and we look at the Fae from our own perspective, because I love mythology and reading about mythology is one of my favorite things to do. So of course we're going to read about ancient mythology, but I also think it's really important to have your own perspective on who the Fae are to you. So we are going to do kind of a mix of both. And the question in the chat is the Fae plural for fairy? Yes and no. The Fae basically Fae and fairy are synonyms. They are synonymous with each other. You can use them interchangeably. You can say fairies as the plural instead of fae. Fae is the more traditional word. Fae is the word that has been used throughout mythology for a very, very, very long time. Fairy is a more modern term that stems from root words that are more from multiple countries throughout Europe. Fairy has a lot of root words that come from Spain and Italy and France and Germany, whereas Fae stems a lot more from Celtic mythology, and it's a lot older of a term than fairy. But both are fine, and both can be used interchangeably. Yes, and if any of you have taken the astral projection classes that we offer at this academy, taught by our incredible Professor Paul, then you are already going to have kind of a head start on the things that we're going to be doing in this class, because we are going to be doing a lot of astral projection in this class as well. So, first of all, the first thing that I want, first I'm going to kind of put this up. Number one, if you are looking for a book and this is your first time looking into the Celtic Fae, the introductory book that I always recommend to students, I'll put
I
it in
can ask them where they're going to be uploaded so you can rewatch them. It's an interesting and deep class. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Don't be sorry. That's totally cool. I figured somebody personally messaged you because I didn't see it come up in the chat.
No, I'm messaging another student and I didn't feel like typing because my hands were full. God, I was on off mute.
That is totally cool. So if you are looking for an introductory book and the book that we use for the first 4 classes of this course, one of my favorite authors who is from Ireland and writes about her own culture and her own traditions, that is something that I super suggest. If you are entering the world of Celtic Fae for the first time, look for authors that are from Ireland, that live currently in Ireland, or Great Britain. You know, the UK totally works too. But looking for authors that are actually from that culture is extremely important. Seeking out mentors that are from that culture is extremely important. I am not one of those. If you take my gin class, I am from the Middle East. I am from, well, my mom was born in Lebanon. My dad was born in Syria. So I always suggest me for a mentor for that, but I am not from Ireland. So look for authors that are from the UK or specifically Ireland. But anyway, the book is called A Beginner's Guide, Fairies and Nature Spirits by Teresa Moorey. Let me, hold on.
Could you put that in the chat for us, please?
Yes, I am typing it out right now. It's taking me a second. Fairies and Nature Spirits. A Beginner's Guide by Teresa. There you go. That is the name and title and author of the book. I have heard that this book is sometimes hard to find. If you do happen to find it, it is usually very cheap. But I hear that it sells out very quick. I guess it's a very popular book. I got it when I was very first looking into the Celtic Fae when I was really little. And so it's also kind of an older book too. But anyway, so that is the book.
I've looked for it several times on Amazon and they have quit carrying it, but they still have a picture of it on their website. So that's irritating. Don't look on Amazon because you'll be irritated.
That's so funny. Yeah, I've heard a lot of my students have come to me being like, I can't find this book anywhere. It is extremely hard to find. And that's so funny because, like, I found it at a bookstore when I was 10. Like, it's but it's an amazing book, especially if this is, it's a very, very introduction book. It is something that is definitely for beginners. But anyway, so the first thing that I would like to ask everyone before we get deep into this is, what is your experience with the Fae? And I mean both. I mean, if you are somebody who reads and somebody who loves mythology and somebody who has read a lot, tell me about your knowledge. If you are somebody who has had encounters with the Fae, I would love to hear about your encounters with the Fae. Yeah, anything that you would like to share about the Fae, I would love to start off with that.
My only encounter is from taking your second class where we reached out to one and then like meditated and had it connect to us.
Yes.
But that was a super fun class, and I'm excited for this one. I've been on edge waiting for this. It was like another class.
Oh, good. I'm so happy. This one's going to be really fun. We're going to do some cool stuff.
I found that I've thought I misplaced something that was kind of shiny, a bracelet. And then I walked away from it, and a couple days later it showed up again.
Wow. That is so cool. That's awesome. I've heard a lot of people comment on how the Fae will take little items from them and then give them back, or especially like shiny things. There's a lot of connection to things that are made out of metal or things that are very shiny that have been stolen by the Fae.
Can I tell my experience?
Yes, please.
Okay. So recently I began going to a Reiki master, and she immediately, like the second I walked into the room, she was like, do you know a lot about Fae? And I'm like, no, I honestly, that's one of the subjects and topics that I've probably for the past few years I've been pushed and told to look into and research just by my guides and by my intuition, and I've ignored it. And she was like, well, so you have a fae that is with you as a protector, as one of your guides, but she's not like a little one, she's like full grown, a little bit taller than you, and I mean she's full grown, she's a big one. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, so with that, um you probably have sensed her and sensed her characteristics, as far as, always feeling like you need to go to the forest, you need to be in the forest, you're supposed to live in the forest. She was like, that is one of the things that she has been and is currently urging you to push forward with, is being like completely enveloped in the forest rather than just, going every now and then. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. So there were quite a few things that she said that made sense, and I since then I have been looking more into it and seeing, what they're all about and what I can do to honor her and talk to her.
That's awesome. What a cool experience. Oh, I love that. Cool. So to raise your hand to answer the question in the chat, to raise your hand, you can go to gestures or reaction. There's at the bar, or it might be at the bottom, I'm not sure, but there's a little button that either says reactions or hand gestures, and you can raise your hand. You can also just put in the chat a hand emoji or say hey. Either way works. Of course. Did you want to share, Jen? Because please share. Okay, cool. Awesome. And a couple people answered in the chat as well, so I encourage you to read what they wrote. It's awesome. And yes, we do have a Fae certification at this academy as well that people can take. Somebody mentioned that in the chat, which is why I mentioned it. But so
Go, just go, go. Please go. Hurry up, buddy. Ouch. You're standing on it.
okay, so does anybody have, it always interests me a lot because I teach a lot of these mythology classes. And it's always very interesting when I talk about the Aziza, which are Fae-like creatures from West Africa, or when I talk about the Jinn, which are Fae-like creatures, more related to what the West calls genies, from the Middle East. And everybody always has very scary and dark things to say about the Aziza and the Jinn. But everybody always has very lighthearted and happy, beautiful things to say about the Fae. And I always found that very interesting because let me tell you, the Fae have a very dark and scary history as well. Much like any entity from any form of mythology, much like the dragons as well, and much like any entity that you are looking at from another dimension or another world, they have beautiful, incredible, amazing energy and beautiful stories and mythology, but they also have very dark and scary stories attached to them as well, especially if you talk about the Fae that are banshees and silky, and there's a lot of different types of Fae. And so does anybody, oh, also we have a couple more people who would like to share. Yes, please. So honey, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh no, please. I want people to share.
I'm always bad for waiting to let everyone else go first, and then I just like, okay, well, my time's passed. I'm trying not to do that.
Please don't do that. Your time has never passed.
Okay. I didn't realize it till like last year, but I'm pretty sure there's a fairy living out by my mulberry tree. And I think it stole a set of barn keys when I was little. So I had the keys on the horn of my unicorn plushie. I was like 4-ish, okay? And I was walking around out there picking mulberries, and you would think, okay, the little girl just handed the keys to her non-actually animated plushie, and it got dropped. Sure. But my dad went out there searching for them. Everyone was searching for them, actually, but he brought out his metal detector and could not find them. To this day, those keys have never been found. And after realizing that I'm pretty sure the one living by the tree out there, I think I might have took them.
Oh, that is so cool. Have you ever tried to like go out to the tree and communicate or talk to it or see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually tried that. I tried talking to it. A lot of times talked to it when I like picked berries, or I talked to the birds that live in it too. I even gave strawberry offerings too to it, which I think it liked because I don't know, just like the atmosphere around the tree just kind of got lighter after that.
Aw, that is so awesome. I've had experiences like that too, where I have given offerings, and yeah, you just get this feeling that they liked it and accepted it, and it's a really cool feeling.
It is. I also love mythology, so I've read a lot. Not recently though. I know quite a bit about banshee, silkies, brownies. What's that other thing? Marrows. So yeah, I know a lot of them, but I can't recall a lot of information because, like I said, it's been a couple of years since I researched them.
So, yeah,
I've been looking.
these are so cool.
They are. I've been looking forward to this class. Like Robin has, like, yes, finally it's here.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, yes. So Kelsey, in the chat wrote what I also kind of wanted to bring up. So something that I talk a lot about in my mythology classes is a lot of the misconceptions that you'll see in a lot of pagan, especially modern westernized pagan groups, is things like the Fae are evil, the Fae are bad, never work with them, never speak to them, never communicate with them. You hear this a lot with the jinn as well. The amount of times that people have come into my classes and been like, what you're doing is evil is amusing. But the that is the thing that we have to realize, number one, as humans. If you were to look at humans as a whole and you were to just be like an alien creature that is just like studying humans, you would probably go with the fact that we are pretty scary and evil. We start a lot of wars, we fight a lot, we are very selfish and very greedy, and there's a lot of negative things that could be associated with humans. But we are also very kind and loving and giving and beautiful people, and there's so much more to a human being than just looking at the terrible things that we have done to each other and to the planet and to the world. And much the same goes for entities that exist in different dimensions. Yes, there are dark, scary things that have happened in the world of mythology and in the world of different dimensions, the world of the Fae and dragons and Jinn and Aziza and all of the above. But to say that they are just evil is missing so much complexity that exists within these creatures and these realms. And they are not evil in the same way that we are not evil. We just are. And we just exist, and we have fabulous, amazing, beautiful, kind people, and people that suck a little and or a lot. And that is usually what you'll find with different dimensions as well.
It comes down to choice.
It does. I like that. Definitely. So the reason that I had everybody start off this class with sharing your experience with the Fae is because we are going to start off this class with a guided meditation where we are going to interact with the world of the Fae. And it's actually pretty cool that not a lot of you have a lot of experience with the Fae, because the point of this guided meditation is to view and see your own perception of the Fae and to meet them without any misconceptions or previous conceptions at all. To go into the world of the Fae, to go into a different dimension, to experience their world in your own eyes, because that is something about astral projection that, at least in my experience, isn't talked about a lot. We could all go to the same place. We could do the same meditation. We could meet the same creatures and talk to the same entities, and every single one of us is going to have a different experience. And that is because everything in life is perception, including different dimensions and including different entities. It is your human eyes, your human experience, your human perception that is going to see and interact and speak with these creatures. And every single person is going to have a different experience. Every single person is going to see the world differently. And it all depends on you. And so we are going to do a guided meditation. So, Something that recently has been put in place on Zoom, probably due to copyright laws, is that they do not allow me to play music during these classes from somebody else's YouTube video or from anything, which is slightly annoying. So I would really love to play some really amazing Celtic music to help kind of put you into the state of an awesome Celtic Fae meditation, but I cannot. So instead, if you would like to, if it helps with your meditations in general, if you are somebody who has meditated before and music helps you to kind of get into that state of mind, I encourage you to go to YouTube right now, or to whatever it is that you use. Go to Spotify, go to whatever you use, and look up some traditional Celtic music. And yes, if anybody would like to share a link to some awesome Celtic music in the chat, please feel free. That would be amazing. I will share one as well. And then I will let you know when we are going to start. I will have everybody get into a comfortable position. This is not a meditation where it matters what position you are in. If you would like to lay down, that is fantastic. If you feel as though you might fall asleep, that is awesome too. I will tell you to set an alarm on your phone. And we are going to do a meditation for it'll be probably about 10 minutes long. If you feel as though you like sitting, please sit. Whatever position is most comfortable for you. And Robin has shared a link to music. If you would like to use it, I will share a link as well. And then we will get started. Hold on one second. Let me pull up my link for you.
Alex,
Yes.
is there any way that the links can be sent to me by email, because I can't write all this info down?
Yes, I think. Could I send it to you on Messenger? Does that work?
That works.
Cool. Then yes. Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Of course. Let me get it pulled up. I will share it to both. Hold on. Okay, so this is the one that I like to use. It is traditional Celtic folk. The one thing that sucks about YouTube is that there are ads, which can definitely mess up with your meditation, but usually there's just one at the beginning, and then it'll go for 10 minutes without having an ad. So here I'm sending it to you now, Andrea. And I am sending it to the chat right now as well.
It's time to improve.
Okay. But please feel free to also just use your own music. Like, do not feel like you have to use any of these links. Please, if you have meditation music that you like, use your meditation music. That's a fantastic question. I think that Zoom will stay open if you click on the YouTube link. But I am not sure. I have never used my phone for Zoom before. I use my tablet and it works if I click on links while on Zoom, but I've never used a phone, so I am not sure. So, of course.
If it helps on Android, you can click on your task manager or hold it down, and depending on your version, you can tap on the icon for whatever application you're using, and it'll give you an option to like view in split screen or pop-up view, and you're able to have multiple applications open at once. Like you can have Zoom up over YouTube or vice versa.
Thank you. Sweet. So, one more thing too. Set your alarm for 10 minutes if you feel as though you're going to fall asleep. Number 2, play the music softly because it is a guided meditation. Usually I don't do guided meditations. I usually just kind of let you go. But this one will be a guided meditation, so I will be talking. So play your music softly so that you can still hear my voice as well. Okay, and once everybody is ready, I'll give it about another minute and we will start. And I will have everybody please make sure you close your eyes, get somewhere that is very comfortable, and yeah, that's it. Okay, we are going to get started. Everyone, please close your eyes. And imagine in front of you is a forest filled with big aspen trees. The aspen trees go farther than your eyes can see. Everywhere that you look around, there are mushrooms covering the ground, leaves scattered everywhere. The leaves on the aspen trees have just started to change color as we enter the season of fall. Every tree is covered in orange and yellow and green, and the forest floor crunches as you walk through. As you examine the bark on the aspen trees, you can see the eyes of the aspens. The dark black circles that cover the tree top to bottom. In the vast forest, it looks as though all of the trees are looking at you, and they notice your presence. You pick a direction and you walk very slowly, noticing the flowers, the leaves, and the gentle breeze that is blowing every leaf. You pick your favorite tree and slowly run your fingers along the bark. And that is where you decide to sit on the forest floor, being very careful not to sit on any flowers or mushrooms. And you lean against the tree. Slowly, you take your hands and place them face down onto the forest floor. And you feel the dirt and rocks and leaves and sticks beneath your hands. As you close your eyes and take a moment to breathe in the fresh air of the forest, to share breath with the tree, as the tree releases oxygen, and you breathe in the smells and the scent of the forest. Slowly, one of the eyes in the aspen starts to open wide. And you notice that the opening in the tree is just big enough for you to crawl your way through. So you get down on your hands and knees, and you crawl through the opening of the tree. At first, it's pitch black, and you can't see anything in front of you. You reach your hands up, and you feel the bark of the tree. You cannot stand up yet, so you keep crawling, deeper and deeper. And soon you see a light at the end of the tunnel. You crawl faster, still noticing how the ground beneath you has changed. You no longer feel leaves and sticks and flowers and mushrooms underneath your hands, but instead you feel something different, a texture that you're unsure of. You don't know what it is. You emerge through the light and realize that you can stand. And you stand up, and out in front of you is a completely different universe, made up of organisms that you've never seen before, plants that you cannot identify, and animals that you don't recognize. You go on to explore, but it does not feel scary. It feels as though you were meant to be here. You walk through fallen plants, and all of the animals there are excited to see you. You interact with the animals. You pet them and play with them. And slowly, as you reach further and further into this mysterious land, you find a place to sit down. There's a running river, but within it is not water. There are giant mushrooms surrounding everything. But you've never seen this species of mushroom before. You sit by the river and take in the mysterious world that you have entered through the tree. You take note of all of the creatures that are surrounding you. You reach your hand into the river and feel the substance that exists within. It is nothing like anything that has touched your fingers before. The sky, as you look up, is not blue. What you perceive as clouds floating through the sky are not white. You decide to stand up and continue your journey, walking through this world that you have stumbled upon. As you continue walking, you notice houses that look nothing like a house you've ever seen. You notice language being spoken between the creatures that exist in this land, but it is not a language that you recognize. You keep walking, taking in every moment, every smell, every color and creature and language that you hear. And faintly in the distance, you can hear music. You decide to follow the music in search of what could be making this beautiful sound. As you walk and follow your ears, you notice that under your feet, as you walk, the nature that is under your feet has a peculiar texture. And you decide to take your shoes off and feel what the ground feels like in this different world. Slowly you approach the music as it gets louder and louder and louder. And you can hear people singing. You can feel the vibrations of them dancing. but they don't look like people that you have ever witnessed before. The music fills your body and you feel the need to dance, and you join in, dancing and singing with the creatures that exist in this beautiful land. And suddenly, one of them asks to grab your hand and take you deeper into the forest. You accept, and you take their hand, and you are guided away from the music and the dancing and the food, and led slowly into a grove of trees, at least what you think are trees, but they look very different from any tree that you have ever seen before. They sit down with you in the grove of trees, and they offer you food. But it doesn't smell like any food you have ever smelled before, and it doesn't look like food you have ever tasted. You decide to try it anyway. You attempt to thank the creature who has given you food and taken you into this beautiful grove. But the creature does not understand. Feeling slightly foolish, you attempt to pantomime, "Thank you." And you just end up laughing. And you and the creature lay and laugh in the grove together as you both eat and enjoy the landscape of this world you have never entered, and a world you are not sure you will ever return to. You attempt to say goodbye and continue your journey, but the creature does not understand goodbye. So you just keep walking. And you continue on your journey. You find what looks like a path, and you decide to follow the path to see where it might lead. You can hear your footsteps as you walk, and you can hear the wind rustling through all of the plants and trees. But it sounds different. As the leaves rustle, it doesn't sound the same as in your world. The wind feels different against your skin. The sounds of the forest are unfamiliar. You finally reach the end of the path. And right at the end of the path is a large aspen tree with eyes looking at you. It is the only thing that is recognizable within this entire world. You notice that it's an aspen. And as you go to touch the bark of the aspen, your fingers notice that it is the same aspen that opened up a portal to the world you are standing in. And even though a part of you never wants to leave, you realize that your body and mind are telling you to sit by the aspen again. You feel the comfort of knowing that this is your way home. You sit next to the aspen. You put your hands down on the ground, and slowly you can start to feel sticks again. You can feel dirt beneath your hands, and this time it is familiar. The tree opens up once again. The eyes of the aspen start to open, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel once again. You make the decision to get on all fours and to crawl through the hole in the aspen tree. And as you crawl, you can feel flowers beneath your hands. You can feel wood beneath your fingertips. And you can feel the familiar feeling of dirt. The smells start to smell familiar. The air feels familiar again. And as you crawl deeper and deeper into the hole of the tree, you can start to make out the same forest that you came from. You make it to the end of the tunnel, and you emerge through and into the light, and you stand up, and you are in the same forest that led you to this portal. And you turn around to look at the aspen tree, and everything is as it was. The aspen tree has closed, and it looks once again like every other aspen tree in the giant aspen forest. The leaves are changing color again. It smells like beautiful humid air after a rain. And you sit by the tree and contemplate the journey that you went on. Was it all just a dream? Will the portal ever open back up again? Where did you go? And who did you meet? And slowly you sit down, look up at the leaves, and take a deep breath and open your eyes. Welcome back.
So interesting and beautiful.
Oh, good. Thank you. So, if anyone would like to share, I would love to hear about your experience. And if you noticed, I did not describe anything because I would like to, other than, of course, our world, I described our dimension. But I would love to hear, who did you meet? What food did you eat? What did it taste like? What color was the river? Where did you go? Tell me all about your experience in the world of the Fae. Yes, Robin.
I kept feeling like I was like surrounded. I don't know if surrounded is the correct word, but like moss was just all around me, just on like little hills and in the valleys, and just everywhere I looked was just moss covering the even covering the aspen trees before we crawled through it.
Cool.
And
That's awesome.
and then I had like this like when you just disguise, that's not the word. When you were saying like the water was there, but was it there? It wasn't water. I it was like when you're painting in school and you would get your water that bluey like sky blue paint color. That's what I saw in my head at least.
Wow. Awesome. What did the creatures look like? What did the animals look like?
I I've been watching a lot of Futurama, so it was like based off of like that is what I was seeing.
Cool.
But yeah, it was definitely a fun experience for me.
Good. Oh, I'm so glad. Wow. I'm reading the chat. So, here, I'll read a couple of them. So Tonya said something blocked me very powerfully and painfully and did not even make it to the grove on our side. Oh, okay. Wow. That's powerful too. That's really interesting. I met a couple of fairies. They were my guides into the Fae realm. The sky was purple with yellow clouds. The water was goopy stuff. You know, in every single one of my meditations as well, the water is also goopy stuff. I totally get that. That is, I always have, yeah, goopy water. I ate a huge deformed looking muffin, and the animals were like cartoon cats and very cute. Oh, I love that. Mine was goopy too. Yeah, it's weird how the water is goopy. I know, Paul. I was really hoping that you would be here for my cool astral projection meditation, but you weren't. But it's okay. I'm glad you caught the end of it. There are strong traditions in Celtic cultures of warning people never to eat or drink while in the world of the Fae, because you would then be unable to return home or nor hunger for human food. I skipped that part of the journey for that reason. The Fae look like they usually do to me, fairly close to humans. Cool. And yes, there's a reason that I had you eat the food. You are right. We are going to discuss and talk about the mythology surrounding food. As you will learn from me as a professor, um, something that I really like to do in classes is, as I talked about before we started this meditation, there's a lot of mythology surrounding the negative aspects of all of the creatures that we are going to discuss and talk about, including the Aziza, including Jinn, including Fae, including dragons, all of the above and more, including the elves, and we could go on and on and on. But something that I really think is important, at least in my practice, is that we look at things from all perspectives. such as in my Jinn class, there's a lot of warnings that you should never look into the fire and call to a Jinn. And in my classes, we look into the fire and call to the Jinn. Now, we do it in very safe, controlled ways. I am somebody who is very experienced. And also, something I want to say too, if you ever feel uncomfortable, don't do it. And I have a lot of students who say that they just didn't do it, which is fantastic. Don't do it. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel unsafe, if you feel like something is wrong, never, ever, ever do it. Ever. That is never something that I want you to feel. But we will. Something that I also teach is that good and bad and evil and righteous are all just human perspectives and human words, and human morality and human values, and good and evil are things that we discover on our own. And there's a reason that we went and we ate the food. And we're going to talk about that. But also, if you chose not to eat the food, I wanted to ask that as well. If you chose not to eat the food, that's amazing. That is totally fine. Like I said before, if you feel uncomfortable, never do anything. And I am very happy that you chose not to eat the food. That's totally cool. I think I fell asleep. That is totally cool too. Yes, exactly. Testing boundaries and inner limits. And we're going to talk about a lot of this and where a lot of these fears stem from, because you will be very shocked to learn where a lot of the fears surrounding the Fae stem from. And traditionally, if you go back 3,000 years, it was not seen. When you read stories, and also stories that have been passed down, because as we know, a lot of the mythology was passed down verbally. It was not passed down through writing. So a lot of the stories were a game of telephone. It was passed down for 1,000 years, and the last person to get it, who wrote it down and made a book about it, did not end up getting the exact same thing as the person 1,000 years ago. And that is with many, many cultures all over the world. And same with me. Obviously, I have only read the books and the stories. So once again, I am not going to have any of the direct stories from 1,000 years ago either. But anyway, before we continue, I want to hear more about everybody else's experience. Please keep going. I would love to hear if anybody did eat the food, what it tasted like. I would love to hear about when I said that there were animals and there were also people, but that they were not animals that you recognized, and the people did not look like humans. What did they look like? What did the people look like? What did the animals look like? What did the trees look like? And the giant mushrooms and the all the things. And Andrea, you go ahead. I see your hand raised. That's why.
Honey has her hand raised first, I think.
Oh, cool. Go ahead, honey. I don't know why it didn't show on my screen that you did. Yes, please, honey.
Okay. Mine was really fun. The animals looked like normal animals, but with different qualities about them. Like some of the deer were purple, and the flying creatures kind of look like a combination of Pokemon and worms. They were supposed to be like bugs. And the river was goopy too. But when you're describing it, it was giving me very strong Mushishi vibes.
Yes, I'm so happy that you've seen Mushishi.
Yes.
Same, me too.
It's very beautiful show. But anyway, the mushrooms that were around then that time look kind of inside out to me, and they're strong enough that I could sit in one. Also large enough that I could sit in one.
So
when got to the like town village. I couldn't see everyone really well, but like there was stalls and like vendors, and so some of them were large, but some of them were like really tiny, like the little worm Pokemon bug flying creature things were selling stuff that looked way too big for them to even hold. That was weird. Cool, but weird. And the people by the fire, that was I was able to see them a lot better. They were small, large, some had 4 legs, some only had 2, and the one that took me further into the forest, it was he had like purple skin, almost to a lavender, and he had a short trunk like nose. And what he gave me to eat was kind of like a biscuit type thing, like a cookie biscuit. Like there's a word for them, but I cannot think of what they are. Biscotti?
Oh,
Maybe?
cool. Yeah. Biscotti.
And it tasted kind of grassy, but something else that I didn't recognize. It was really good.
Ooh, that is so awesome.
And I think that was everything. Oh, and the ground, it felt kind of like jello rubber, like kind of like you know, like the gushy stress animals, kind of like them, but softer.
Wow. That's amazing. You had such a cool experience.
Yeah.
That's description.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I can go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to determine, you talked about this being an astral projection.
Yes.
I kind of thought it was a meditation. Is it the same thing or are they different?
That is such a fabulous question. So, astral projection in the very beginning, when you are first kind of entering the world of astral projection, it is very much a meditation. It is very much a visual meditation where you are meditating and you probably don't even feel as though you're going anywhere different. It feels much more just like a visual experience, a guided meditation, or even just like a dream. As you get further into astral projection, you start to feel as though you are having an out-of-body experience. So when you are first starting with astral projection, as we are, it starts off as a guided meditation. And then as we get further, we'll start dealing with more out-of-body experiences.
Okay. Yeah, because I've never done, as far as I know, I've never done astral projection, and I know I'm taking the course. So I'm going slowly at each class, at that class, as to what I can deal with. And I found that this meditation and then astral projection was fine. As far as the experience goes, I didn't have anywhere near the description that Honey had, but I did notice that the picture that we have on the class, that's who I met, you know, as far as the person, and they gave me food, and I just kind of like tasted it. That's just the way, you know, if I don't know something, I just take a taste of it and see how it is. And it was kind of bland. But other than that, yeah.
That is so cool. That is definitely the picture that I use for this class is definitely very similar to what I see as well when I go to the world of the Fae as well. So that is so cool. And it's awesome that you decided to try the food. It's so funny that you say it was kind of bland. I feel that. That's funny. I'm gonna go through the chat really quick. Okay. So
may I verbally describe some
yes.
things that I wrote in the chat? So I'm kind of I joined in Pacific time. Apologies. but I felt really deep connection to the group and the meditation as I've spent time in the Fae kind of realm. And the one that came through that particular for me was like a friend that showed up, you know, somebody that greeted me there. And it was, you know, Fae, not necessarily elemental, like plant or whatnot. It was about half human size, very friendly and accommodating, welcoming, not too whimsical or creature like, you know, as we've seen in artwork, you know, extended ears and look like kind of like a tree, but more a bit like that, but not too extravagant. And it was this one had been with me before, and this is the first time that I saw um, this friend, and it was very nice meditation because I don't usually get a visual on fairies and whatnot. I've seen them occasionally or felt their presence and converse, but so thank you for that. And I got my sky was kind of pink, you know, I think more like a sunset pink. Um, and my water was more like crystal, like not necessarily goopy, but vibrant, strong, um, and like a liquid crystal almost. And um, so my trees were more like energy bodies, you know, so everything was more like energy and less structural. The food was kind of like this very interesting porridge, kind of like stew kind of thing. Very flavorful, but very different. And so I didn't necessarily eat it like I would eat a physical food, but I experienced it like I would energetically almost. Like I savored it without having to put it in my mouth and chew it, consume it. And in a way that as many of us probably offered food to the fairies, how they might experience it. So it was really kind of new and fresh experience for me, and I'm really grateful for this. So I want to say thanks.
Oh, wow. That was such an incredible description. Thank you. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, you're welcome. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so happy you had such an amazing experience. That sounds so cool. And that's very similar too to the way when I experience food in different realms. Exactly. It doesn't so much feel as though you are chewing and eating the food, but more like you're experiencing the food. And I love how you said that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, and I love the water. That is such a cool description of it being like crystals. That is wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a liquid crystal.
Yeah.
Um, mhm. Clear and um, mhm. Energetic. There's like an energy to it.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. That is so amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt more home to me than coming back out of the portal.
I get that too. Wow. Okay, so Jordy said the dude that took me away from the group was top half African ox looking, and the bottom half was human, but with hooves. And his eyes reminded me of the old characters that I would play or that would play in the band Showbiz. Or in the band at Showbiz. And the food was a slimy looking, large coconut looking fruit that had boba tasting seeds inside of it. And it was baked and had a crisp outer layer, kind of like creme brulee. It was bomb AF. Awesome. And then Kelsey said, everything is very dual for me. Half of the grove was bright and airy, with shimmer and glimmer and glow with mushrooms that were sweet and juicy, while the other half darker and gloomier with fog. The river was constant through both and silver like metallic substance. The village for me was like an an MMORP game, an NPC town. The animals were heard but not seen, and I just speak better through written words. So that's why I'm putting here. Awesome. Thank you. I love both of those experiences. That was so cool. And I love how everybody had such a different experience. That's why I try really hard not to describe anything, because I want you to experience it without me having anything to do with it.
As we were going through the meditation and the astral projection, I was feeling very anticipatory. Like I was looking forward to the next step.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. That's what we're going for. And Katie says the air felt denser. I noticed a smell I didn't recognize. The ground was kind of rubbery for me. Sort of like astroturf, but without the bounciness. The sky was a light yellow, and the clouds were a light sunset type of oranges and pinks. I was dancing down the road instead of walking. The river was thick and brown, but felt light, sort of like fine sand, even though it looked thick and muddy. The people-type creatures were small and bluish purple, and the fruit I was holding was large and round and deep purple. I was holding it with both hands, and it smelled sweet, but I don't think I tasted it. The super tall mushrooms were bright green on top. Coming out of the meditation, I felt a bit lightheaded, and I kept sneezing a lot for some reason. It was a very cool experience. Thank you. Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. That is so neat. Wow.
I also wanted to mention is that I had to get up for a few minutes after the meditation, and I found my feet tingling, not going to sleep, but tingling.
Wow. See, that is kind of the very first step of astral projection, is that your body will feel different. And as you get more into astral projection, you will start to notice that you can completely separate your body, and you will feel as though you are kind of hovering above your body and kind of looking at yourself and the world from a third person perspective. And some of the first signs that you'll feel that you've slightly astral projected is things exactly like you guys are describing. Things like feeling lightheaded, even things like sneezing, things like having your feet be tingly, things like having your body just feel different when you come back. And so that's really cool. That's awesome. Yes, body scans are amazing. And yeah, no, same here. I can only do body scans when I'm laying down. It's hard for me to do body scans while I'm sitting up, especially because for me, at least, body scans force me to feel my body more, which I know is the point. But it's like if I'm sitting and I'm just chilling and I'm not doing a body scan, I don't care and I'm not in any pain and nothing's wrong. Suddenly I do a body scan and I notice all the little aches and pains, and I notice that I'm sitting weird and that my foot is funny. And so I like it better when I'm laying down.
Reading chat myself and listening to everyone, I noticed a lot of people are talking about how their water was like muddy, murky. Even oh gosh, what was said? What like a silicone is what someone I saw somewhere. And I feel weird because I avoided the water. Like I looked into the riverbank and I saw it, and then I kind of turned myself around and walked away and let it be. And like someone was telling me, like, yo, just appreciate it, but don't mess with it.
I love that. And it looks like actually in the chat, a couple people, or maybe one person, also had the same feeling as you, and they did not touch the water as well. And I think that that goes very hand in hand with also kind of what we are about to talk about with the food and with the water. I had you guys do things in the realm of the Fae that sometimes in certain mythology that is believed by specific groups of pagans, um, that is a little bit more taboo, such as touching the water, such as eating the food, such as dancing to the music, such as walking into the party uninvited. A lot of these things, the only thing that I didn't have, not the only thing, one of the things that I did not have you do that would have been very taboo, and one of you, I have a feeling somebody would have said something, is telling them your name. So we are about to talk about all these fun taboo things and kind of the mythology behind them and where they stemmed from. And some of them stem from actual ancient tradition, that and some of them stem from, as we are going to talk about, the introduction of monotheistic religion to specific places around the globe, and specifically the introduction of Catholicism and the introduction of Christianity. But of course, there are many other monotheistic traditions that have passed through Europe and the Middle East and everywhere for thousands of years.
So can I ask about some of the taboos? For instance, like saying your name, because my experience is that the Phaenomia spring, and both the season and the spring water, and so there's kind of a mythology that's woven into my life, and it's shown up in different places and times. This spring is, and so I'm wondering if that's my own fancy or if that's something that is my own imagination, or if that is something that is actual. Or tell me more about the taboo about names.
Yeah.
So, something I've learned is names are very powerful. They carry weight with it. You don't necessarily want to tell something your name that might use it against you.
Okay, so they can use
like the story of Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, so they can like capture your essence or power, control you in a way with your name.
That's how I felt it, or felt about it. I'm very cautious. Like usually I go by a different name online, but for Academy stuff, I use my preferred name.
Okay. So, and what, yeah, I know about the taboos about eating food and drinking and so forth, that you're kind of like, now you've gone into that a little too deep, maybe, and you're unable to extricate yourself.
Yes. Okay. So first we'll start with the name thing, since that was kind of the first thing brought up.
Okay.
So there are, this one actually specifically, the name thing. The name thing, it's so funny because when you Google this, I love Googling ancient mythology because you'll get 500 billion different answers from different sources. And most of these sources are going to be random Google articles that were written in, 2019 that don't actually explain the mythology very well at all. And that were written by Americans. And so anyway, but the name thing, depending on who you source it from, it is said that when Catholicism came to Celtic tradition, and as most of you know, if not all of you, I call it genocide, but it goes by many names, of forcing people to either follow your religion or die or get very hurt. there ended up being a lot of stigma against the Fae, because the Fae were seen as false deities, or the Fae were seen as false prophets, or the Fae were seen as false saints, or the Fae were seen as by many things, or witchcraft. They were seen as extremely taboo and things that you should not believe in. And this name thing, very specifically, came from when Catholicism came and Christianity came to Ireland, when it came to Scotland, and when it came to a lot of places near Scotland and Ireland. And it was a way to make the Fae seem as though they were evil, which also created this lovely stigma where if you were not Christian, if you had mental health issues, if you were autistic, if you were a woman, if you were so many things, then and you were a woman who liked to read or speak, then obviously you had given your name to the Fae. They had taken over your body and taken over your soul, that your soul was now part of the Fae realm, and that you were trapped in the Fae world, and that evil things were happening to you, and therefore you needed help from the church. The name thing specifically has a lot of ties to Christianity and Catholicism during the time where they were trying to make sure that people were not pagan anymore. Now, a lot of the fears surrounding the Fae do not stem from Christianity, and I'm not saying that all of them do. The name one does. The name one does stem from Christianity and Catholicism. Now, does that mean it's not true? No, not necessarily. But it's not a traditional Celtic pagan idea. It does not come from the ideology of traditional Celtic practice. So, if you are following the ideology of traditional ancient Celtic practice, then telling the Fae your name does not do anything evil. But because so many traditions were kind of interwoven with Christianity and Catholicism, such as in South and Central America, you will see a tradition called Santeria. And Santeria is a mixture of ancient pagan practices and Catholicism. And you get that throughout the entire world. There are many names for many, many different traditions that are kind of an interwoven mix of paganism and Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Islam. And the name thing is not traditional. So take from that what you will. In my eyes, a lot of times I try to not really adhere to a lot of things that came from the introduction of Christianity. And that's not something that I practice or follow. But it is totally fine if you do, and completely okay. But it is something that did stem from the introduction of Catholicism and Christianity to attempt to make the Fae seem more evil. Same with, if you've ever heard the stories with little kids wandering into the forest and being stolen and taken by the Fae and never returning. A lot of those they don't necessarily stem only and solely from the introduction of Christianity and Catholicism, but they are much more of, I don't know if you want to call it old wives' tales, where they were trying to make sure, because they did not have the technologies that we have today, they were trying to make sure that children did not wander into the forest, because it's very easy to get lost and die in the forest. And so a lot of these taboos either stem from Christianity or Catholicism, or they came from wanting to protect children from doing things that they should not do. And that doesn't necessarily mean going into the realm of the Fae. It also just means not getting eaten by a wolf. But a lot of them are more traditional, and we're going to talk about those ones too. So in my eyes, I do not practice not telling the Fae my name. Now, I've given them, and I think that you brought up a wonderful point, Michael. I give them names that I would like to go by in the Fae realm, and that isn't because of a taboo mythology. It is just because I enjoy going by a different name in the realm of the Fae. And so I will give them different names for myself, just like names that I would prefer to go by rather than Alex. And but yeah, that one stems from Christianity and Catholicism. I'm gonna look at the chat now because I feel like there's a lot that's been said.
Can I just quickly mention, when I was in the realm, and I did eat because it was offered to me, and I didn't want to be insulting to the being. So it was more sort of like they're giving something to me that I need to, reciprocate by taking a bit to eat. It's hospitality.
Yes, I agree. And that is a wonderful segue into the next thing that we're going to talk about. And the next thing is the food. But hold on. Before I get there, let's see. So yes, to answer your question, Andrea, I have seen fairy rings in person. Ones that just are naturally created. Fairy rings, by the way, for people who don't know, are rings that are naturally made out by anything. Now, that can be a circle of aspen trees, it can be a circle of oak trees, and most commonly known is a circle of mushrooms, specifically a circle of red mushrooms with little white dots on them. But it can be anything. Fairy rings traditionally throughout Celtic mythology are anything in nature that creates a circle naturally. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a ring on the ground. Now, lots of mushrooms and stuff, I have seen many, many rings created by trees and mushrooms, or even just naturally by fallen trees, or by, lots of natural things in the forest. But it can also be above the ground as well, which I have also seen. Fairy rings can also be when two trees link to each other and they create little circles. Those are also considered fairy rings. When trees like start to grow sideways and they connect to each other and you kind of see that little ring that is created, that is also a fairy ring.
That's neat. Thank you.
Of course. Yes, exactly. And so that was the end of kind of my rant about names, which once again, like I said, do not be scared to tell the Fae your name. That does not stem from paganism. It does not stem from ancient Celtic practice. It stems from Christianity and Catholicism. But also, not only does it stem from Christianity and Catholicism, as Paul brought up, it in many cultures and throughout Celtic practice, throughout Ireland, throughout Scotland, and throughout many places in the UK in ancient practices, it is considered rude. It's an insult not to tell them your name. And that is for many reasons. In some cultures, it's just, seen as unkind. Why wouldn't you tell them your name? Especially if they ask, because they're not seen as things that can take over your soul. In many cultures, they don't even have this idea that the Fae can take over your soul or cause you to need an exorcism, or all these things. If you really look at them logically, it's very easy to tell that they came from Christianity. Especially if you look up some of these things, like, why can't I tell the Fae my name? And it'll be like, oh, they'll take over your soul and they'll give you mental health problems and suddenly you'll need an exorcism. And you're like, it's Catholic. So it's slightly obvious. But not only is it rude for that reason, but also it was rude because when Catholicism and Christianity were taking over and murdering people for their beliefs and for their practices, it was seen as if you didn't tell the Fae your name out of fear, then you were not actually a part of a lot of these Celtic pagan practices, that you had grown the fear that Christianity put into you, and that now you were scared of the Fae when the Fae didn't do anything to you. There's no reason to be scared of the Fae. There are reasons to be scared of the Fae. There are. We're not going to go there, but yet. But it's more of this idea of, why wouldn't you show hospitality if they have shown nothing but hospitality to you? But that is in specific cultures and specific groups and specific practices throughout ancient Celtic traditions. So, yes, the food thing. So, the food thing is not something that stemmed from Christianity or Catholicism, which makes it a lot more interesting, at least in my opinion. The food thing stemmed from when Greece, many, many years after. So you have Greek paganism and Greek mythology. And for anybody who has ever studied Greek mythology, you know that in the underworld, you do not accept food. You just don't. If you ever travel into the underworld and you are practicing Greek paganism and Greek traditions and Greek practices, then you do not accept food, because you will get stuck in the underworld and it'll be very painful to leave and you might never get out. And when Greek mythology and Greek paganism took over a lot of different regions of Europe, you have, so have any of you ever read about the Fae, specifically in Ireland, and specifically in certain isles throughout Ireland? There is this idea that all of the Fae, all of them, live in mounds underground. And the specific Fae that live in mounds underground, they are seen to live in the underworld. And so when Greek mythology and Greek practices and Greek pagan traditions met Celtic practices and Celtic traditions, you had this idea that if the Fae live in mounds in the underworld, well, then you cannot accept food from them, because you will get stuck in the Fae underworld. And so when those two cultures met, that is so many stories came of people getting stuck in the realm of the Fae because they ate the food. Now, once again, that is not traditionally Celtic. That comes from a mixing of cultures, but this happens all the time throughout the entire world, because obviously spirituality mixes and blends and melds with each other all the time. And so that is where it came from. And there's a very specific lake, and there's also a very specific shoreline as well, where natural mounds in Ireland just form everywhere, and you will see these little natural mounds of dirt, and you can't, it's not just like little tiny hills of sand that you can just knock over. They are like permanent mounds that are impossible, not impossible, but very, very difficult to dig through or knock over. And also it would be like really, really bad if you did, in a lot of Irish traditions and practices. And they don't. In Ireland, they don't mess with the mounds there, because they are the Fae that live in the underworld, or that live underground. It wasn't that they lived in the underworld until Greek mythology met Celtic mythology. And so that is where that one comes from. It comes from the idea of the underworld. So if any of you have ever heard the story of Hades and Demeter and Persephone, if any of you haven't heard the story, it is a great story. It is such an awesome and cool myth. But just to tell you in very, very, very short, kind of the idea is that Demeter, who is the goddess of the earth, has a daughter, Persephone. And her daughter was very curious and very rebellious. And one day she found a gigantic crack in the earth and decided to go into it. There's much more to this story. I am giving you the very, very brief outline of it. Anyway, she found a crack in the ground. She decided to go through it. And the crack was so deep and so big that it led her to Hades. It led her to the underworld. And in the underworld, she explores, and her mother, Demeter, can't find her and doesn't know where she is. And Demeter gets extremely depressed and extremely sad. And when the earth got sad and depressed, she stopped growing plants. And she started to get cold, and winter came, and none of the crops would grow, and the sun would not shine, and the earth would not produce anything. And the leaves fell off the trees, and everything became cold and bare. And Hades, well, there's many different versions of the story. It depends on which one you read. In some versions of the story, he fell in love with her, and Persephone fell in love with him. In some versions of the story, he more unconsensually fell in love with her, and in essence raped her. But in some rendition, like in some versions of the story, they both fell in love with each other. Anyway, he gave her a pomegranate, and he presented her with this gift of the pomegranate. And Persephone did not know that if you eat food in the underworld, that you would have to stay there forever. And Persephone ate the pomegranate, and Persephone got stuck in the underworld. And Demeter, of course, once she found out what was going on, got extremely upset and caused threw the world and the earth into chaos. And lots of people started to die. And this, of course, threw off the balance of the underworld and the living, and Hades got very upset. And so Hades and Demeter had to come to an agreement that Persephone could go up and be with her mom for half of the year, and then come down, and she could be with the love of her life in some renditions, or in some cases she was forcibly had to be in the underworld. But anyway, so she spends half of the year in the underworld and half of the year up with her mother. And so for half of the year, Demeter is happy and loves and gets to be with her daughter, and the world is lush and filled with vegetables and fruit and filled with sunshine and all of the beautiful warmth of the earth. And then half of the year she is super sad and nothing will grow and everything is cold. The story is way cooler than what I just described. Please read the story, but that's kind of the essence of it. And so eating food in the underworld is, especially when offered to you by Hades, is will trap you in the underworld forever. And that is where the myth came that if you eat food from the Fae, who live in these mounds in the underworld, then you will be trapped there forever. And so that's where it came from. I'm glad that a lot of you know of the story. Yes.
What happened when all of us ate the fairy food that was presented to us and you told us to eat?
So in Celtic, because this class is focused on Celtic traditions without the influence of any other tradition, nothing. Actually, that was where I was going next. So I just wanted to read the chat to see if there were any questions. But where I was going with next was that in Celtic tradition, without the influence of Greece, they used to have feasts with the Fae. They would have feasts with the Fae. They would give offerings to the Fae. The Fae would eat food from the human world. Humans would eat food from the Fae world. And you're not there was no mythology about getting stuck anywhere or having anything bad happen when you eat food from the world of the Fae at all. It was not until the introduction of Greece that any of this mythology ever came up, even with the mounds in Ireland. That was not a thing that came until Greece and Greece's influence on the rest of the world. And so in this class, we are only focusing on ancient Celtic traditions without the influence of Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, or Greece. And Greece's paganism and their influences on Celtic traditions. So it is perfectly fine to eat the food in the world of the Fae.
Yeah.
But
So my understanding, that came through the Romans, through Gaul and Brittany, that storyline came, and my understanding too is the Romans kind of quashed a lot of this as well. Not necessarily the Christians, but the Romans.
definitely, the Romans had a huge part to play in it as well. And there is actually a lot of controversy on whether or not the specific story that I just told you is Greek or Roman, because the Greeks and the Romans, as well as a lot of Europe, as I had said before, a lot of these stories were passed down through verbal traditions. And so if you ask someone from Greece if Persephone and Demeter and Hades are Greek, they will probably tell you they are Greek. I have a lot of Greek friends, and a lot of them tell me that all of that is ancient Greek mythology. And if you talk to somebody who is a strega Italian person who practices strega from Italy and who is follows a lot of Roman mythology, they will probably tell you that that story is Roman. There is a lot of controversy surrounding whether or not, I've even heard some people say that it's Lebanese as well. But it is not Celtic, is kind of the main point there, is that yes, it might be Roman because of the big influence that obviously the Roman Empire had on that entire region of Europe. And it might also be Greek. So you're right. Thank you for bringing that up. It also might be Roman. Yes. But in essence, it is not Celtic. And that is something that I wanted to really push in this class, is that we are focusing on ancient Celtic mythology. And we are trying really hard, even though it is very hard, to focus solely on the mythology of Celtic Fae, and without the influence of the Romans and the Roman Empire, or the Greeks, or the many other empires. The Persian Empire as well has influence on a lot of these places too. And we are trying to see the world through Celtic mythology without the influence of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Persians, as well as the Christians and the Catholics. Now, if you want to vanish into the Fae realm, then, go eat the food and go dance at the parties. And no, really, in Celtic mythology, which I love, and that's one of the reasons that we're really focusing on Celtic mythology, a lot of these things were not taboo because they had this relationship with the Fae that it was very based on respect. And yes, the banshees and the silky and a lot of other types of Fae were scary and did cause harm and did do things that are considered very harmful and bad and evil in many ways. And so did things like sirens. But that there was this idea of respect as well. And they didn't have a lot of these things that were considered extremely taboo until a lot of other influences from a lot of other empires across the world. It was much more of a respect respectful relationship where they would, a lot of people even throughout Celtic mythology say that a lot of the music, a lot of ancient traditional Celtic music was influenced by the Fae. So of course they danced to Fae music, and that a lot of stories and poetry and writing and astronomy was influenced by the Fae as well, which negates a lot of these taboos that came much later. Yes, Robin.
I believe someone's trying to talk in public chat, but they private messaged me by accident. All it says is iPhone 13, but they were saying that the Romans took I can't say it now because of this, took many things from Greek mythology, often just renaming the gods.
Yep.
And a lot of us were probably thinking that, but just didn't bring it up. But
yes, they did. You could say the exact same thing for the Greeks and the Egyptians. A lot of people say that the Greeks just took a lot of Egyptian gods and gave them new names, and that Greek mythology is just Egyptian mythology with new names. This is what makes all of this very hard. Is that not only was spirituality shared in beautiful ways through trade and through celebration and through festivals and through love, but also it was also shared through cultural appropriation and stealing, and raiding tombs and doing a lot of things that are not seen as sharing an open practice with each other, which makes, number one, these classes super fun and interesting, and number two, also makes it really hard to distinct when I'm like to discuss these mythologies as if they are extremely separate, because they are extremely separate. They are indigenous practices that are open practices, but still indigenous practices, but also because of the influence of Egypt and Greece and the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire and so on, it becomes difficult to make distinctions. Yes. Egypt, nobody has ever, at least that I have read, accused the Egyptians of not having their own mythology. People accuse the Greeks of stealing from the Egyptians. Nobody accuses the Egyptians of stealing from, I guess. I can't even think of where the Egyptians would have stolen anything from. So yes, I agree with you, Paul. Completely. If you look at Egyptian mythology and you compare it to Greek mythology, it is very easy to see where the lines are crossed. And if you do a lot of research, you can see that it is very plausible that Greece stole a lot of its mythology from Egypt, as well as from Lebanon too. And if you look at the mythology of Lebanon, it is very clear to see that a lot of Greek myths also stem from Lebanon, which is why people have said that the myth of Persephone is not Roman and it's not Greek, but it is actually Lebanese, which is a very common criticism of Greek and Roman mythology. And yes, that too, Kelsey, exactly. Yep. So we covered the name, we covered food, and then dancing with them at their parties, going into their homes, which we didn't do as well, touching the water and things like that. Once again, the reason that I had you do all of those things, I had you dance with them, I had you grab their hand, I had you touch the water. Now, some of you said that you didn't, which once again, awesome. Totally fine. If you feel uncomfortable, do not do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. Totally fine. Please don't. But the reason that we did all of this is because I only had you do things that were never taboo traditionally in Celtic culture. They were only taboo after the influence of other cultures. And that is why we did them today in class, is because they are not taboo in Celtic culture. They are only taboo because of the influence of others. And that is totally okay, Robin, because this is it is 9:17 in my time, in Colorado Mountain Time, by the way. And it is the end of this class. So I'm going to stop recording and then leave room for everybody's questions. So 1 second.